the triangles program, and I'm making available again a prettied up version a little bit, but the triangle program is the one that draws the spiral of triangles. And we're looking at the class with the main method in it. It looks very similar to what we've seen before with red rect. We're creating in our constructor, when we create the triangle, we pass a title line, a string for the title of the frame, and we add a window listener so that when we close the window we exit out. We set the size. We add this canvas object, CV triangles, which we'll look at in a second, to the center of the frame and set it to true. So it looks very similar to, like I said, let's get the red rect one. Very similar to red rect, right? Pretty much almost exactly the same thing. It's just putting in a different, it's the class has a different name and it's sticking in a different canvas. So now let's look at the canvas. There's a lot of new stuff in here that I want to go over. So one of the things is there are a lot of fields in here. So a field is a hunk of information that that the class stores. So the whole class knows about this triangle count variable here, okay, and that it has a value of 50. What this final says is that we're not going to change the value of it. The fact that it's private means only this members of this class here are going to understand or have access to it. The static says that it belongs to the class as a whole. So even if we created a whole bunch of CV triangles objects, there would only be one instance of this variable here, triangle count, and it would always have a value of 50. Okay. And we have a similar situation here with drawing to canvas ratio, except it's a float. So we need to give it a float value. So that's what that F is at the end. When we say 0.95 F, that's just a way of saying this is going to be a float value. Okay, so this is declared as float. We have a final private. Notice this one's not static. We have a final private float Q. So what that means is that in our, and actually I'll show you where we initialize that. So it's final, but what that means is that we're going to set its value once in the constructor and then never change its value. So we can actually pass in a value of a float value to our constructor when we create it. So let's see, where do we? Okay, new CV triangle. So we could have passed in some value here, but we also must have a constructor with no, oh yeah. So we also can have a constructor with no parameters, and what this constructor with no parameters does is call this with this parameter. So when you see this with parentheses, it looks like a method, right? Called this. What that means is call the constructor that takes this parameter. Okay, so we have a float. We're passing a float 0.05 F to the constructor that takes a float. So that's this guy. Okay, so when we add CV triangles with no parameters, we go to this constructor and pass this parameter. Okay, so that sends us over to here. All right. And I think we have talked about that a little bit before about when you create a new object, what you do is you call the constructor on that object, and you may and again, like I said, we're calling one with no parameters, so we're going to start here, and then we're going to when we use this keyword and make it, and it looks like a method call here because we're saying this and then parentheses and the value, then we end up calling this guy. Okay. All right, so those are the constructors. Oh, and we're familiar with paint, so we have our paint method that is going to get invoked whenever, like when the window first opens up, if the window ever gets resized, or if it's partially obscured. So what does that mean? Let me be a little more clear. So here the paint method has been called to open up the window when we opened up the window for the first time. When we resize the window, every time we resize, the paint method gets called again, and that allows us to draw it at these different sizes too. And then if something comes and obscures part of the window, and then we move this away, this has to be, the part that was obscured has to be redrawn. So in all those instances, basically the operating system sends a message to the Java virtual machine saying, hey, you better, if wherever, if you had a window over here, you better redraw it, or the JVM knows that it's been resized or whatever. It will call this paint method. Okay. But then we have all these other methods that actually are called from within the program, and that's what I'm going to talk about in the next video.